Now I'm going to demonstrate the model AV40 carbide saw grinder and point out how the saddle assembly works, how you set up to top and face grind your carbide saw blades. I'll go into router bits, shaper cutters, your adjustable dados. It's going to give you an idea on how to go ahead and use the grinder. Now, on the saddle assembly, I'm going to go ahead and just remove the cup and cone by unscrewing the silver stud up here. This is your cone. The cone, this is the cup. I'm going to remove the cup and cone, and here we have the diameter adjusting slide lock. Now if you go into the instructions and look, the instructions clearly show all the different parts of the saddle assembly. Now if you were to, we'll go ahead and put the cup and cone back on. That's it. Now if I had a saw blade that was, let's say, 14 inches in diameter, what I could do, or 14, 16 inches or larger, if I swing this around, you see how I done that? If I just go ahead and swing this around 180 degrees, that sets this back. Then all I do is I loosen this up, and I can swing. Then I can position so my stop finger's in the front again. Now you can see how much area that gives you. See, and all I done was just went ahead and rotated this. So I loosen this, the diameter adjusting slide lock, rotate the diameter adjusting slide, and go ahead and lock it down. Now, what I'll do is go ahead and set up a saw blade to show you how to top grind. Okay, actually, first what I'm going to do is set up to face grind. When you face grind, you want to remove the stop finger. Just loosen up this handle that locks your stop finger down. Completely remove the stop finger. Then you mount your saw blade on top of your cup. Put the cone on, and when you drop your cone on, leave it loose, and you can just tighten it. You can tighten your saw blade right on there by using the cone to tighten this stud. Then after you have done that, put a little bit of downward pressure. You can turn the blade so the taper on the cone seats into the arbor of the saw blade. Then you come in here and just go ahead and tighten the bolt that goes through the cone. Then this diameter adjusting slide lock with this little lever down on the bottom, it's probably a little hard to see, right in through here. If you leave that a little bit loose, just enough, so as you move the saw blade, you can swing the saw blade back and forth. Now watch what happens. If I come up to the diamond wheel, and let's get a real good close-up. I'll get the light down in here. It's probably going to be pretty hard to see. If you go ahead now, if you just put both hands on the blade and you just swing it so you see that the face of the tooth completely is parallel with the flat part of your diamond wheel, parallel with your diamond wheel. Then once that's parallel, come in here and take this diameter adjusting slide lock, take the lever, lock that down, and on the side here you have your stop that sets your depth. Now as you're moving in you want the face of the tooth, your carbide, you don't want to drop off the inner part of the diamond section of the wheel. So when you come in, you want to adjust this just so you're probably about a 1/16 of an inch from dropping off to moving inward. If you're moving inward, you don't want to drop off. When you set it up, you'll see what I'm referring to. And once you're set up with that, what you want to do is come back and forth. You come into the wheel. Don't you leave the tooth away from the grinding wheel, then move inward. Now then, if the motor was on, the minute it starts to grind, then you can move, just be real careful, move back and forth, back and forth. Let's say you'd move it 1, 2, 3 times. Next tooth. Rotate to the next tooth. Come in, touch it onto the surface of the wheel, grind again. Be careful when you're coming backwards so you don't have too much pressure where your blade swings as you're coming. But so as you're moving back and forth, you want to just do it enough so you don't come back too far towards yourself or the operator to where it slips off the wheel. After you do a few teeth, you'll pick it up. And you want to get a grind just so you hear that you're getting a nice solid grind. You don't want to apply a lot of pressure, but you need enough pressure to remove the dullness of the face on the face of the tooth. Now, the one thing about the AV40 grinder is, which I should have pointed out in the beginning, is that your saddle assembly, this unit is solid. There is no play in it whatsoever. There's a lot of grinders on the market where you take this saddle, you can actually put a saw blade, you put this saw blade onto your cup and cone, you can actually rock it. This one here, I can go and lock this down. Lock this down on here, and there's no way. It is solid no matter which way you go. This thing is solid. That's why you can do an absolute precision job with it. Now your next operation is to set up and top grind. Top grinding is where you use your stop finger. When I set up the face grind, the diamond section of the wheel was pointing in towards the motor. Now, to set up the top grind, all you do is turn your wheel around. All I'm doing is flipping it around so the diamond section now is away from the motor, is facing away from the motor. And then you would go ahead and insert the stop finger. Now, behind the lever that locks the stop finger, there's a nylon plug. And the reason that's in there is so as you tighten this, you're tightening onto the nylon plug onto the stop finger rod. That's so you don't damage the rod. So if you ever loosen this and you pull the finger out and you can't get it back in, well, chances are you might have bumped this and moved that nylon plug in. So all you have to do is loosen it up, take the screwdriver, so reach in there and push the nylon plug back and put the stop finger back in. So, now, another thing is, on the AV40, you've got 3 holes in the machine base, which before you went in this far, you should have looked the instructions over, come to the videotape. You've got the 3 holes. This first hole, number 1, and this hole here in the bottom of the saddle assembly, that first hole towards the front, you strictly face and top grind all your saw blades with a position in those 2 holes that match up. That's where you face and side grind all your saw blades. Now next, now that I showed you how to set up to face it, we'll go over and set up the top grind. To top grind, you use this same number 1 hole, and I'm going to move it over to the number 2 hole. The number 1 hole, which is the hole to the front of the saddle, and the second hole, or the middle hole in the machine base. Also, you'll have on the machine base a scribed line. All you do is I just loosen this up, take this hand, my left hand, onto the front of the saddle, and just swing it over, lock it down. You line it up with the scribed line. Then we have our stop finger in. What you want is this, the stud loose. You see, what I've got is this all loose. There's only two things that make this completely move. It's by having this silver stud loose and having the diameter adjusting slide lock loose. You lock one, if I lock this one, the only thing that's going to turn is this. If I lock this one up here, the only thing that's going to turn is my cup and cone assembly, but it's only going to pivot down by the diameter adjusting slide. Due to the fact that this is a 10-inch blade, I'm going to be using number 2 hole or center hole. If I had a blade that was larger in diameter, let's say 16-inch or larger, then what I would do is come over to my 3rd hole or my last hole as I'm facing the machine as I am now, to the left, or number 3 hole, which is shown in diagram, and use the front hole in the saddle assembly. As I pointed out, the first hole or the hole towards the front. So basically, anytime you're using the AB40, you're always going to be using the first hole in the saddle assembly. The only time you would use this second hole, or the hole that's in the saddle assembly base that's closest to the operator, or this end of the machine, is when with some of the grinding fixtures. You may have like the adjustable dado. You may want to go ahead and use that hole, but you're going to find very seldom are you going to use this number 2 hole in the saddle assembly base, but it's there just in case you ever need it. And set up for top grinding this saw blade. So we have our stop finger back into the cup assembly. You want the blade facing counterclockwise, the same direction you would have it if you were going to face grind. You always have it counterclockwise. And then first of all, you want the stud loose. You want to loosen up your stop finger lock on the side. Pull your stop finger back and position your stop finger just so it touches the face of the tooth, and right about in the middle of the tooth, from the top to the bottom, right about in the middle, or you can even have it down a little farther, and then just so it catches it. When you rotate you want to just hear, if you can hear that on the video, just so you hear just a little click. Then, what I'm going to do is bring this up, see now, with my stop finger, with this saddle, with a diameter adjusting slide lock tightened, with this stud loose or my cone loose, I can take my stop fingers, you see, and just swing this back and forth. See my stop finger, let's get a close-up of this if we can. See, the stop finger's right on the face of the tooth. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is come into the wheel. First of all, this is an alternate top bevel saw blade. So I'm going to duplicate the angle that is on this blade. And just by looking at it, I can tell that this is a 10-degree bevel. And if you're real unfamiliar with it, of course, there's actually no need to go out and buy a protractor, but you can do it and just lay a protractor across here, put it on the angle of the tooth, and you're going to find out immediately, because they run 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 degrees. You're not going to find it. It's always in equal increments of 5. So it's either 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I would tilt the motor down so I grind the downward bevel. In other words, the bevel, instead of top, from the low part going from left to right, I'm going to go and tip my motor down, so I do the down bevel first. So all I do here is loosen up, I'm back here, loosen this knob here, pull this pin. This pin is for when you want to go back to 0. You put that pin in the hole back there, and you just lift it up. Once you insert it, you feel it go all the way in, just come back here and lock this black handle down. Okay, you just lock this handle. So if you want to do it, you loosen it, come back here and pull the pin. Then you've got, you have an angle finder. You put that on, and you can come up here, right there, you tip it to the angle that you want, that's it. Now, what I'm going to do, we're going to have to have a close-up over in this direction. All I would do here is loose, now that I've got this tight, I've got it pretty well positioned. My stop finger is on the face of the tooth I'm going to grind. I'll lock this down. Then, first of all, as I mentioned, I'm going to come down and do my down bevel. Whenever you start the face grind, or top grind rather, I always do the bevel that's downward. So I would come in here. Now I'll swing my finger into the wheel. And then look down on the top of the tooth to the wheel. Now I see daylight, or a space in between the closer to the face of the tooth than the back. It's not, the gap isn't closed. Now I want to put the same angle. So I've got to go ahead and move, I'm going to loosen this back up and just swing my stop finger rod, swing this until I line the face of the tooth up. Then I'll just, with my diamond adjusting slide loose, I'll come in here and just loosen this up until it lines up. Actually, when you're going to go ahead and line the top of the tooth up, if you put your left hand underneath on the cup and cone and have this just a little bit loose, you want it, or a little snug, and leave your diameter adjusting slide lock down here, if you have that also just a little, snug a little bit, just so you've got some movement in here. That way you can come in here and rotate. With your right hand, you can rotate the diameter adjusting slide, and with your left hand onto the cone underneath the blade, you can swing it back and forth. And that'll allow you to position this and copy the angle from the wheel onto the tooth perfectly. It takes a little practice, but once you have it, it's almost automatic. See, I'll mess it up again. See how the stop finger rod is positioned straight? Now, I'll tip this so that I get the face of the tooth, top of the tooth, real close. See, I'll just rotate it as I'm doing it, moving it in closer. Then, see, as I just I'll rotate. Now, are we getting a real good close-up of? See, and once you have that lined up, the first thing you want to do, lock down your diameter adjusting slide, come up here, lock your cone, come in here, there again, lock your front stop. This black lever, what I'm doing, bring it in, lock it down, and you want to do the same thing. Don't move you don't want to move too far in where you drop off the inside of the diamond section, but you want to go far enough past it without falling off. And then, as you're top grinding, you want to make sure everything's locked real good. You got everything locked down. All you do is you come in, you can hear that it's touching. Now, if I had the motor on, get a nice grind so you can hear a nice grind. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go 4 times back and forth. Next tooth, every second tooth. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You'd go all around the blade. Remember, every second tooth is the one that would have the bevel. Now I'm done with the, let's say I'm done with the bottom bevel. What you want to do, come in, tip your motor, 15 on the quadrant again, upward. Now all you do is you leave everything completely set up, but you're going to do the other two. So just advance one tooth, there you got it. Now come in and grind. But whenever you switch over, you're going to possibly have to move your motor, because remember, you went ahead and changed bevels rather. You switched from down and you swung your motor up. Thicknesses of the blade vary. So when you at any pivot point, depending, because the bottom part cannot go down. The thicker the top part, it can only come up. So that's going to change. So anytime you change from doing like your down bevel and coming up, you're going to have to possibly move your motor in. So all you do is this black hand wheel, you come up, you turn your motor in, on until you just touch it. Now you turn your motor on and bring in until you start to get a nice grind like you had on the other bottom teeth. Then you go ahead, every second tooth. But you'd want to go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can go 3. Get a rhythm. What you want to do is get a nice rhythm. Don't apply pressure with this, because this unit is so solid. It's as solid as can be. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, some guys go 3, some 4. I've already. If you want, you go 5. But the main thing is, whatever you do to one tooth, do to the rest. Whatever you do to the first tooth, do to the rest. Now, the one important thing I should have pointed out before I got started is you should always use a marker. A marker tells you what and shows you what you're doing. If you took a marking pen and you mark your first tooth, then if you're going to face grind it, mark the face of the tooth. That way when you go in and you touch it against a wheel, you can look at it to see how close you are, and if you have to make any type of adjustment. The same thing in when you set up the top grind. If you mark the top of that tooth, and then you come in and when you grind it, and then if you hold your finger right underneath the tooth, it'll throw the light on the top of the tooth or on the face of the tooth, and you can see it. It's just like a magnifying glass. It shows up just perfect. See, then you can make any fine adjustment that you have to have, or would have to make. As far as what I done, I just showed you how to face grind and top grind, and alternate top 10-inch 60-tooth ATB or alternate top bevel saw blade. Just, no matter what you have, the only difference is between all your blades is some of your other blades might have, as I mentioned, might have a 20 degree, might have a 5 degree, so just be in how you tip your motor. Or in your triple chip tooth design, that's a little different. When you get into those, go into the instructions and just follow the procedure I give you in the instructions. You're setting it up, you're going to set it up the identical same way. The only thing is you have 45s on each corner with flat and a raker tooth on the top. So basically, once you learn how to set up one tooth style, you can set them all up. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll just show you some of the attachments, how they mount. Let's say you had smaller blades. This small cup and cone is a must. Because if you had, let's say you had a blade 7 inches in diameter, 8 inches in diameter and down, that's where you want to use the small cup and cone on. So all you do is you loosen that, remove your large cup and cone, 1-inch plug, pop it right over. Your small cup and cone, you just stick it right over the 1-inch plug, mount your blade. You go through the same procedure as you did, but the only thing is, this here is for real small, your smaller diameter saw blades. So let's say you've done some larger blades, you had some smaller ones to do, and you wanted to switch over to do an adjustable dado. All you do is loosen that, remove the small cup and cone, You take the adjustable dado attachment, again, mount that over the 1-inch plug, and you can either do 1/2, 5/8, or 3/4 arbor dados. The majority of them are either 5/8 or 3/4. You'd want to line on the adjustable dado. Anytime you do them, you set them on 3/4. Because when they rotate, they actually wobble. And whether you realize it or not, when you set them on 3/4, if you visualize your motor being on 0 quadrant, or your wheel being complete, I'm going to go ahead and put the motor back on 0, put my pin in, lock it down. If your grind have your motor on 0, a complete 90 degrees to the top of this dado, even though it's wobbling, this dado, as they adjust it and they run it on the machine, it wobbles. It's hard to realize or hard to visualize, but you are actually grinding the top of the tooth flat, and that's what you want to do. So many guys make a mistake by that because they think that just because this dado, it's sitting now at an angle set at 3/4. My gosh, they think if I grind it like that, it's not gonna cut, or it's gonna cut steps. No, it's the other way around. If you grind it, if you set this dado on 0, then come in so it's perfectly flat like a saw blade, then you grind it all flat, all the teeth flat. Then when your customer goes to set it on 3/4 or 11/16 or 5/8, whatever groove, and it's spinning, that's when it's going to start jumping and cutting grooves and jagged edges into the bottom of the wood instead of a flat. I mean, if you study it, look at it, and study it, you'll be able to pick it out why you must have it on 3/4. All you do on adjustable dado is they're usually about, again, as every tool, pick out a tooth, mark it with a felt pen, mark the top, move in the AV40, just loosen this all up, slide this in. You would leave it loose on the 1-inch plug so you can rotate it. Again, my left hand is on the fixture, my right hand is on the diameter adjusting slide lock on top of the saddle assembly, and I'll come in here and just line the face of the tooth up right to the wheel, lock my diamond adjusting slide, and come in here now and tighten down everything on the dado fixture. That's tight, the 1-inch plug, tighten my stop. That's it. All I would do then is I would come in, you want to set your depth. Okay, I'm going to bring my motor back just a little bit. There we go. And again, when you come onto the wheel, you want to make sure you move on the wheel. If it's a carbide dado, which the majority of them are, move onto the wheel, but you, again, do not be careful so you don't fall off the inside of the diamond section. You want to go past it. By doing that, you keep the wheel wear, you keep it equal as much as possible. See, if you were to come in there just a little bit all the time and not use up that whole diamond area, well, then you're going to wear, the wheel is going to wear very fast at a different angle besides being straight. But if you come in, you grind and use up that entire diamond section, again, it's going to keep the wheel wearing as straight as much as possible. But again, when you go ahead and top grind saw blades, your wheels, there's no way around it. If you study the helpful hints or helpful tips that I've given you along with the AV40 and study the wheel wear that I pointed out, you should easily be able to understand why it is important when grinding to take the steps that I point out. You're going to get a lot more life out of your wheels. It's going to do a lot better job on the tools. So let's say you got done with the adjustable dado. You remove that. And remove the adjustable dado attachment. Now let's say you had shaper cutters to do. A raised panel. All you do is you mount the shaper cutter attachment onto the 1-inch plug on top of the diameter adjusting slide. And I have a raised panel. All you do, now this one here will take 1/2, 5/8, 3/4, and 1 inch. You just take the 1 inch size. Now these are very simple. If you could do these all day long, you'd become pretty rich. Here, if on carbide, you'd want the diamond section of the wheel facing the motor. You would set up just like you would facing a saw blade. But instead of me moving the saddle over to the left or positioning it in hole number 1 on this, I can just swing it just like this. That's what makes the AV40 so versatile and so simple to use over other equipment. Now I can bring it up here. I'll go ahead and turn this wheel around. This goes to show you how fast it is to switch from one tool to the next without going out and buying a machine to do all the different tools. It is just absolutely simple. Anybody that says you can't do it with fixtures haven't seen what we've got. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do, see, I'll just make it without moving my saddle over. I can leave the saddle position number 2. All I'm going to do is line this up. The same as I would if I went to face grind a saw blade. If you leave your diameter adjusting slide lock loose, you leave just a little bit, and you leave your shaper cutter fixture loose a little bit, come in here and just touch it against until you travel back and forth. Just get a close-up of that. When you travel back and forth, and you see that it's perfectly lined up, lock it down, lock your fixture down to the 1-inch plug. You're set up to grind them. You come in here, you make sure your front stop is set, grind it, come back, grind your next flute, come back. See how I'm doing that? Grind. 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 See, on these here, probably what you'd want to do, take like 5 passes. This is a 3-wing. One wing, 2 wing, 3 wing. Now, all right, you do them, and then you want to go back again. See, but there again, mark the first wing that you're going to do, color it, and put a mark on the outside of the cutter so you know where you started. Come in and face it. You can go around the cutter 2 or 3 times. I'm going to show you how to do a spiral planer. The spiral planers are very, very popular with your contractors. Because what they are, or what they have replaced, was the old jack plane, where it had a little knob on it, where you'd take it to a job site, and if the doors were sticking or windows, they'd just take that plane, a hand plane, and just run it along the door. Well, now, what they use is, they call it a porta-plane. It's this little spiral cutter with and that they take it to the job site, plug it in, and they just run it up the door. What it does, I guess, just takes the work out of the elbow grease. Okay, to sharpen these, there again on this one here, all we have to do, turn our motor over. See, if you had a steel cutter, you'd put on a stone wheel. Carbide cutter, put on a diamond wheel. Now another thing, when you go to tighten your wheels, don't over tighten them. It's not necessary. All you have to do is come in and just put just a little bit of pressure on it. Just a little bit. Because as you've got left-hand thread on your arbor, and as your wheel spins, it's not going to slip. Before it would slip, your nut, if you didn't have it quite tight enough, it would tighten on its own. But you don't want to leave it loose and have that happen. You can really lock them on. But it's not going to happen if you just a little bit of pressure. Don't go forcing it. Now on your spiral planers, very, very simple as the rest of the stuff. Now here, I can go ahead with this one and again leave the saddle right where it's positioned in the center hole of the machine base. All you have to do here, as it points out in the written instructions, is leave your finger about a 1/16 of an inch, or not quite, away from the edge of the wheel. Position your tool rest right on the bottom underneath the flute. So this, as you rotate this, or slide it down the finger as I'm doing, it spins real easy. Then lock the center bolt on the fixture, which locks down the tool rest rod. So all you do is take your motor, you bring the bit onto the tool rest, bring your motor in until you, first of all, you actually tilt your motor to match the bevel. And again, color the tool. Usually if you tilt your motor about between 4 and 8 degrees, all depends what angle they have on the cutter. Then with the bit colored, if I go ahead and color this bit, or the spiral cutter, the spiral on edge, come in here and just move in. And as I'm moving in, just before I get to the wheel, there, I just touched it. And then I take a look at it. If we can get a close-up, you can see where I hit. They usually have a primary and secondary clearance angle. So you'd first do the primary, which that's set exactly where you'd want it. So you'd come in, you'd make sure your front stop is set. You want to, just as you start coming up that tool rest, you want to start to grind. And then just pass it right on through. The minute you pass through, pull your saddle back towards you, slide this back, rotate to the next flute, move up till you come to your stop, come down, position your flute onto the tool rest, and again, just go ahead and spin it. And the minute you're done grinding that one, go back to the next one. Make a few passes on them. When you're done with that, then what you have to do is tip your motor up again, just a little more. This time probably to about 10 to 12 degrees, because that gives you a clearance. Then what you can do is move in with your wheel, rotate your wheel by hand so you touch it. Now if you look at this, I'll mark that. You can see that it's absolutely perfect. I'll put some marking on this cutter, come in, whoop, I didn't have this quite tight enough. There we go. Now, if I go ahead and spin this and bring it back, you can clearly see where I touched the secondary clearance. So, by using your felt pens and marking the tools, it'll show you exactly where you're grinding. See, if I was too low or too high, all I'd have to do is tip my motor just a degree or two. So your spiral planers are very simple to do, simple to set up and do. The main thing is, whenever you go to set up a tool to sharpen it, always make sure whatever fix you're using that you have everything properly tightened. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and point out the router bits. Now, what you'd want to do is change from the 6-inch wheel to the 4-inch. And when you mount your 4-inch wheel, you want to mount it so the diamond section is away from the wheel, or away from the motor rather. There again, just snug it just a little bit. Hold the wheel while you just snug the nut that locks the wheel arm just slightly. Now, when I go ahead and going to set up for router bits, I'm going to position my saddle in hole number 1 of the machine base, and again in the first hole to the front on the saddle assembly base. All you do is pick out a router bit you're going to use, sharpen. And what you want to do is color the flutes. Now on router bits, I point this out in the literature that I gave you. On your steel bits, they have what I call a little bearing on the end. It's a guide. Those cannot be removed because they're actually formed into the steel bit. But on your carbide bits, you have your bearing, which slides right over the edge, and then you have a little socket head cap screw that holds that bearing in. You must remove this bearing on the end in order to sharpen your carbide bits. Color the flute of the bit. Paint the flute with the felt pen. Mount it in the chuck and leave it overhang. You see, if you can see here, I'm not shoving it all the way in the chuck. I'm going to leave it overhang, stick out of the chuck a ways. Leave your motor on 0. And what I'll do is loosen up your 3/8" bolt on the side of your fixture, your bit holder. Leave your fixture, just take your finger and just snug up the bolt that locks it to the 1-inch plug. Leave your diameter adjusting slide lock just a hair loose, and then all you do is come into the wheel. Let's get a close-up of this. You actually eyeball this up. See, as you turn it, it's just like setting up any other tool. Right there. Once you line it up, see how I've got that positioned? I was able to rotate my router bit fixture with the bit in it against the wheel by having this just a little bit loose and having the diameter adjusting slide lock a little loose. I could take again my left hand on the fixture, my right hand on the saddle, and could take it and move it and position it any way I want it, and just look at the bit on the wheel and watch as I was moving how it was lining up. When I'm close, I lock it down. Lock your diameter adjusting slide lock. Now, I'm very close. So what I'm going to want to do, now I'll come in and bring the motor in. Now you see what I've got to do is let the fixture come out a little bit, loosen up my diameter adjusting slide lock again, and reposition just a little bit. There, now it's perfect. This is lined up perfect. I can go ahead and lock down my router bit attachment to the 1-inch plug and lock down my diameter adjusting slide lock, because all my other adjustments now, if any, would only require moving my motor in and out, because I'm that close to having it completely lined up. Now if I go ahead And I can just rotate my wheel by hand against the cutter, against the bit, and I can see where I'm touching it. I'm touching on the bottom and on this edge, so I'm touching in both places. So I can go ahead, I could turn my motor on, come in with my bit away from the wheel, and once I'm under, I'll come onto the wheel by rotating, by swinging my bit into the wheel. Don't come in straight. What you want to do is just swing the bit, swing. Let me explain this a little better like this. See, when I'm talking of even face grinding saw blades, what you want to do is come in and once you're on the wheel, swing it into the wheel. Don't come in straight. Are we getting a good shot of that? Don't come in straight like this. You want to come in like this once you're lined up and bring it into the wheel and then grind. Again, be careful so you don't slide off. Once you get used to it, you can actually sharpen a router bit in 1.5 to 2 minutes or less. There's nothing that's faster sharpening router bits than this setup that Thorvie International has. That is one way you can sharpen router bits with your motor on 90, just the way you see your motor sitting. And as I explained, how to loosen up I'll leave this router bit attachment loose, the diameter adjusting slide lock loose, and coming in and lining it up. Or, the way I used to do it years ago, you can have your motor on 90. And bring your fixture up. So it's almost straight. Then, bring your wheel down. You'd position your bit so it goes under the right side of the wheel, and you'd bring your motor all the way down, and then you could grind it. You see, you may have to go and loosen this, tip downward if you're hitting on. I'm going to loosen this here up. Say you're hitting on this part of the bit. That would tell you you'd have to come down, but there again, in the instructions I point all this out, which way you'd have to move your motor if you're grinding on a certain area of the bit. But no matter how you do them, you can either do them straight. Your straight bits, you'll find that you may want to do with your motor on 90, as I have it now. And all your other type of router bits, you might want to go back to setting up and doing with your motor on 0. There again, you just throw the pin in. Once the pin is in, lock your pivot lock, and that's it. You're back to 90. Then you can go ahead, and as I showed you, tip your fixture down, come in, line it up, lock it down, and grind it. There's a fella that was in Minnesota who I was just recently speaking to that bought one of these router bit attachments. After he had it for several weeks, he called me up and said, "Al, I cannot believe that I've been doing it the hard way for 25 years." He said it took him, he had 5 straight flute router bits. They were 2.5-inch long cutting edge. It took him 6 minutes to do all 5 of them. And of course this fellow was in the business for 25 years and he was doing it the hard way. I don't expect someone just going into it to do 5 router bits in 6 minutes, but once you get to know what you're doing and get good at it, you'll come close to that. Now, we've got a lot of grinding fixtures, and all of them, what I've done is I went ahead and I showed you quite a few different fixtures and how to set them up. But we've got electric hedge trimmer. it just goes on, and all of them, every single one of them, set up the same way, just as fast and simple as the ones that I had showed you. Now, what you should do, where it's very important with the AV40 carbide grinder, this machine being as solid as it is and as accurate as it is, you're going to find that you're going to grind your saw blades very true compared to some of the other stuff that you would use to grind them on. Now, I want to point this out. Your roundness gauge is important because when it comes to doing your triple chip tooth, your alternate top bevel, you're going to find that as you get going in it, they're going to come out without you checking them. I can go and do this blade 10 times facing top and not get a variation in it more than probably 3/1000ths all the way around it, as far as from top bevel to bottom bevel. And that is doing all the bottom bevels all the way around the blade, then tipping the motor up and doing the top bevels from right to left all the way down. I won't get a variation in the points from center of the saw, from center of arbor hole to the outer edge of circumference of the blade. I will not get more than 3/4,000ths variation in the saw blade after I've done it 10 times. Because you get to know the feel of it, you get to know the sound of the grind. This is all things that come in as you work with it. The more you work with grinding tools, the better you're going to get. It's just like everything else. Now, when you do your triple chip saw blades, that's where it comes in. The real importance is because you have a raker tooth followed by a triple chip. Anytime you have a raker tooth in a cutting tool, that raker is a cleaner tooth. And the only way for that to work is for it to be lower than the other tooth. And there again, go back and refer to the instructions. I go into that thoroughly. What the raker is, how it compares to the triple chip tooth. Read those over and then you'll understand why it's important to use your roundness gauge when sharpening an 8 triple chip tooth saw blade. Because you've got it, when you come in to grind, your triple chip has a 45 on each side, and it's got such a narrow center to where when you touch that against the wheel, it's very easy to remove a little more carbide off that than it is the raker, because the raker on top is so wide. It's got the full width of the tooth, where again the triple chip has just a very little section. And once you start doing those, you'll clearly see why it's so important to use the dial, the roundness gauge on those. I'm going to go into setting up one other fixture, which is a very important grinding fixture, and that is the knife to grind joiner and planer knives. So all I do is unscrew the black knob that holds the saddle assembly onto the machine base. Set it aside. Is mount a 6-inch aluminum oxide grinding wheel. Okay, I'm going to mount the 6-inch aluminum oxide grinding wheel. It's like a dish shape. If you set it down on a kitchen table and set a coffee cup in front of it. Set a coffee cup on it. It's the dish shape. The side that has the taper on it, that goes towards the wheel. Or towards the motor, rather. Okay, now I'm going to mount the knife fixture onto the machine. It makes no difference which way you position this, because it travels straight. The table travels straight to the base by traveling on these rods. So that has no bearing, no matter how you when you set it down, no matter which way you position it, your knives are going to come out true. So the other thing is, the reason you have it at an angle like this, it hollow grinds the knives. Now, if you want to, I go in thoroughly into some of the helpful tips that I give you and with the instructions. I show you why some of the guys want their knives hollow ground. When it comes to a joiner planer knife, your joiner planer knives absolutely come out much better by using them hollow ground versus those that are flat ground. And again, refer to the instructions and look at that, and you'll clearly see why. Now, what you would do, this is the clamp for the AV40 knife fixture or the wood chisel. You use it for mounting the wood chisel or the knife fixture. And you just set it onto the bottom base, and you just, with this bolt it through. Let's have a shot of this on this side, close up. You just bolt it right down to the base with this clamp. You just tighten it down, that's it. Then you would mount your joiner planer knife under your clamps. This here is so simple to use and operate that it's to give someone or to go ahead and demonstrate it is there's just nothing to it. Now when you tip, what you would do next is tip your motor to match the bevel of the knife. Again, color the angle on the knife, bring it up to the wheel. When you tip your motor, bring your motor down and rotate the wheel until you just start to grind on the knife, and it'll show you if you're grinding too much towards the sharp edge of the knife or back towards the heel, and whichever it is, back off. Now, the way you can avoid hit and miss or picking up your angle by tilting your motor, again with a protractor, if you had a protractor laid it on, it'd pick up the angle, then all you have to do is tilt your motor. But you can see how simple this is. You just bring your motor up, you'd run your motor down now, and go ahead and grind your knives. See, what I could do is actually take this and bring it a little closer, move it a little closer in another inch. You won't have to travel quite as far downward. But this is a very, very simple unit to use. We do have an automatic that if you want, it works similar, but you can insert your knife under the clamps, walk away from it, sharpen a saw blades, come back, and you've got a knife that you can actually see yourself in. It does just a fantastic job. Anybody that can afford the automatic knife grinder, that's the way to go. But if you're not going to get a lot of knives, depending on where you're going to look for your work, if you're going to go to a lot of cabinet shops, you're going to be looking at a lot of joiner planer knives. If you're going to take work off the street, your hobbyist, they also use them, but they do not use them as often. So that's when this knife fixture works absolutely fantastic. There's nothing out there for the money that's going to ever